Why is it so hard to trust God? We know we're supposed to do it. It might seem simple in our minds, but a lot of the times when we're going through the fire or when things are going on, it can seem like a really hard, daunting thing to actually do. We're going to talk about some ways that we can reshape our mind on what it even means to trust the Lord, and just change our heart posture so that trusting Him just becomes more easy. Because we can't live the most abundant life God has intended for us if we're not trusting Him. You know, if we don't trust God and we try to take control, it's just going to cause, more trial and error. It's going to cause fear and anxiety. It's going to cause all of these things when God is saying, hey, I have a better way. And that's through trust and faith. One thing that I think is very important to note about what it means to trust God is to note what it doesn't mean to trust God. There's been many moments where I've walked through trusting the Lord with something and being disappointed and wondering, why didn't God show up? I thought God was supposed to show up. I thought that's who He was. What is going on? And just being left feeling abandoned and hurt. And it's created hesitancy in me to trust God in the future and just confusion on why things turned out the way they did when I thought I was trusting the Lord. And in those moments, the Lord made it very clear to me that I was not trusting Him, but I was putting an expectation on Him. He deciphered the two. He made it known that putting an expectation on Him was me deciding in my mind, okay, I trust you to do X, Y, and Z. I want this, or I want that, or I want this situation to turn out this way, or I want this to happen before Wednesday, or I want this and that's what I'm trusting you with, God. That's not trust. That's an expectation that God never said He's going to fulfill. God never promised, ask me to do whatever you want and I'll do it, even though it's not my will and it's not my best for you. That's not what the Lord says. The Lord tells us that we can ask things according to His will and it will be done. When we're asking things that God already says He's pleased to do, we can have full trust that it will be done. And so that's the difference between an expectation and trust. Trust are in things that God already says He is going to do, that God makes known that He pleases to do for us, right? But why does it matter that we trust God with the outcome, no matter what that looks like, even if it's not what we expect, rather than putting expectations on God? Why? Is that because, we don't get a say and that sucks and I wish things worked out the way I was, or the way that I want, but God just, whatever, does whatever He wants and that sucks? No, that's not it at all. Isaiah 55, 8-9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." God knows better. That's why there's a difference between trusting His thoughts and His ways and His plans over our expectations and our wants and our ways and our plans. The next thing that's important to note, this is something that the Lord has spoken to me that has changed everything. Helped me understand trusting the Lord in just such a different way. We've already talked about how God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts and His ways are higher than our ways. And so we shouldn't be trusting Him with an expectation, but we should be fully trusting Him with His plans, right? Over our situation, over what we're going through, over our future and our past and our present. But it can still be hard. We might know that and we might say, okay, well, I'm not putting an expectation on God. I really am trusting Him with His plan and His ways and what He wants to do, but it's still hard. Why is it hard to trust in what God is going to do? Sometimes we keep the responsibility on us that we're really supposed to give to God because we don't realize what it really means to surrender control and to trust God and to walk in faith. It means that we are responsible to give it to God, to give what we're worrying about, what we're wanting, our fears, our anxieties, our desires, to give it all to God. That is our responsibility. We must do that. If we don't give it to God, He's not going to do anything with it. He waits for us to give it to Him. And when we do, He takes it. And now God is responsible. If you've surrendered your life to the Lord, truly, God is responsible for your life. If you've given Him your desires, if you've given Him how your life turns out, what you do, where you go, all of the things, God is responsible for your life. He is responsible to work in those places in your life. If you've surrendered relationships, friendships, family, God is responsible for your relationships, your friendships, and your family. If you surrendered your future, your job, your work, God is responsible for your future, your job, and your work, right? Think about any area of your life that you can surrender and trust God with. It now means that it is His responsibility. So the responsibility gets taken off of us, right? It is not ours anymore. It is God's responsibility. It's such a cool way of looking at it because we know God is perfect and He doesn't fail. And so if God is the one who's responsible, that's so freeing. How can we not trust God when He is the one responsible and not us? I want to clarify that in that giving of God the responsibility and Him taking it from you gladly, He might say, okay, now this is what I'm asking you to do. And He might tell us to do things or instruct us in a specific way. And so then it is our responsibility to obey God. It is our responsibility to walk through the doors that He's opening. It's our responsibility to act upon what God is doing, right? That is our responsibility. And so if God is opening a door and saying, hey, this is the way, this is the solution, this is what you've given to me, I'm answering it, and we say, nah, it's not going to happen. Trust God to be able to prove His faithfulness, because He is able to prove His faithfulness, because He is able to handle everything that you give to Him. No matter how hard, how daunting, how challenging, He is able to handle it. Another thing to note is that sometimes things don't go the way God plans. He's not the dictator over life. We still have free will. People still have free will. Sin is still in the world and the world is still fallen. So things aren't just going to be easily maneuvered, puzzle pieced together exactly how God wants. But even when sin interferes, even when other people maybe in their free will interfere, even when things don't go the way God desires, He is still more powerful and still able to work through that. Way more than we're ever able to. And so yes, we don't live in this perfect world, but yet we can still trust God with even the fallenness of this world and to be higher and able to work through it. So looking at these two things that we've already talked about, once we give it to God, we truly trust Him with it, and now it's His responsibility, right? That's not an expectation we've put on Him, but it's truly, okay, God, your will be done over this area of my life. I'm not saying we can't give God specific requests, because we can and we should, but even when we do that and we say, God, I want this very specific thing, I'm not saying just pray and say, God, your will be done, that's it, right? Sometimes we can pray that prayer. A lot of the times we want to give God everything, and we should give God everything, every little desire of our heart. If we want salvation for somebody, or if we want freedom for something, or if we want a specific job, or if we want this specific thing, we can pray those prayers, and that is A-okay. But we just have to make sure that we're not putting an expectation on God still. You're saying, God, I want this, but more than I want this, I want your will, right? And that is what we can trust. We can trust that God knows best. We can trust that God hears us, knows what we want specifically, and yet still His ways are higher than our ways. And the last part I want to look at, because even knowing these things, it can still be kind of daunting, because in our mind we might be like, okay, but is God's will in me giving him things and surrendering things just to use me or to give me a hard life or to do this or that? Well, Psalm 34:8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. This says, try it. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste it, see it, just try it, and you'll know. There's no like, oh, I beg you to understand that the Lord is good. It says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Saying that the Lord is good. He's faithful. He wants blessings on blessings to be poured out on his children, joy and peace and love. If you look back at your relationship with the Lord, no matter how long it's been, I guarantee you can see God's love faithfully through that. Through it, you can see all the ways God has shown up. Don't forget that. Trust that he's the same God in the past as he is in the present, as he will be in the future, right? The rest of the verse says, blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Taking refuge in God has to do with us trusting God, has to do with us submitting and surrendering to God through our faith and through our trust, right? And it says that if we do those things, we are blessed because we take refuge in God. So don't put an expectation on God for him to do what you want. Trust that he knows higher, that his ways are higher. Trust that if you do give it to God, he will use it. He will take it. He is taking on that responsibility. You don't have to worry about it anymore, right? All you have to do is act after God starts fulfilling the thing that you've prayed about. Act upon it. Obey God, right? And then trust that after you're doing that, and as God is working in your life, that all of these things that he's doing are good. The ways that he is responding to your prayers and responding to your trust is good. It is for your benefit. It is for others' benefit. It is to give you a blessed, joyful, and loving life, and for him to draw closer to you, know you deeper, and to just pour out his love on you. We should constantly remind ourselves of the goodness of God, of the desire that God has to help us, right? And trust that he will, that he says he is going to, right? And trusting that God does know higher because he's God. Okay. Love you guys.